They say some people are born invisible. But tonight, one waitress was about to be seen, not for who she was, but for everything others assumed she wasn't. And what happened next? That would change everything. It wasn't just the champagne that shimmered under the golden chandeliers. The air itself felt expensive. Gilded mirrors, ivory roses, and 100 smiling guests filled the ballroom with a kind of unspoken arrogance. Isabel Cruz, 25, stood near table 8, her black apron crisp and her white shirt already beginning to cling with sweat. She held a tray of hors d'oeuvres steady in her hands while scanning the room for empty glasses and polite dismissals. Weddings like this always carried a certain weight. Not the emotional kind. Not the kind of joy or sentiment families whispered about over folded napkins. No, this was a weight Isabel had learned to carry young, the knowledge that she didn't belong. Not really. She could polish her vowels and smooth her posture, but there was always something in the way they looked at her that reminded her of what she wasn't. Tonight, it wasn't just in the glances. It was in the sharp click of heels behind her and the voice that sliced through the string quartet. "Excuse me. Could we maybe get someone who actually speaks English?" Isabel turned. The bride, radiant and tipsy, clutched her flute of champagne with one hand and gestured with the other toward Isabel's tray. "I asked for shrimp, not whatever this is." "Is that even shrimp?" "God." "Ugh," another bridesmaid whispered, eyeing Isabel like she was a mistake. "It smells weird." "This is what happens when you hire randoms," the bride added, rolling her eyes. "Did she even wash her hands?" Laughter followed. A ring of bridesmaids in pastel silk giggled behind perfectly manicured hands. One of them smirked and whispered, not quietly, "She looks like she walked in off the street." Isabel froze for a half second. Her fingers tightened around the tray. Her throat burned. But she didn't drop it. She didn't flinch. She gave a small nod and walked away, heart hammering against the tight fabric of her blouse. Back in the service corridor, her breath came fast. Her reflection in the metal prep station blurred slightly. Olive skin. Dark eyes. High cheekbones that always reminded her of her mother. She hated that this wasn't new. She hated how familiar it felt to be ridiculed in public and have no room to respond. Every job she'd ever worked, from diners to department stores, had moments like this. But tonight, it stung deeper. Maybe it was the way they laughed. Or maybe it was how quickly the laughter passed, how easily the moment evaporated for everyone but her. Isabel had been told her whole life to be proud. To hold her head high. To remember the sacrifices her parents made crossing borders and cleaning buildings. But pride was a quiet thing. It didn't protect you when someone looked at you like dirt. It didn't shield you from the way people assumed you were invisible. She wasn't angry at just one insult. She was angry that the bride looked at her like she was a problem. Angry that they laughed like she had no feelings. Angry that even now, in her 20s, she was still standing in the back, being judged for doing her job. She returned to the floor with another tray, her face composed, her movements exact. She didn't look for the bride again. She didn't need to. She heard her giggle again. Heard the same sharp tone mocking the florist, then the DJ, then someone else from the staff. How hard is it to follow instructions? I swear, people just don't try. This is why I hate hiring local. Each word was a slap. Not just to Isabel, but to everyone like her. She didn't respond. She couldn't. But inside, something boiled. She hated that they thought they were better. Hated how small they made her feel. Hated that the manager just smiled through it, pretending not to hear. Growing up in a neighborhood where English wasn't the first language for most families, Isabel had learned early how the world worked. How some doors stayed closed no matter how hard you knocked. How teachers assumed your parents didn't care because they couldn't come to conferences. How customers at the restaurant where her mother worked would snap their fingers for service and then complain if her accent was too thick. She worked hard not to become bitter. But sometimes, it was hard not to feel it building. Like rust. Like storm clouds. Like tonight. Near the bar, a man in a sleek navy suit watched the exchange from earlier. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't looked away either. When Isabel passed, he leaned slightly toward her. "You handled that with more grace than she deserved," he said quietly. Isabel blinked. It wasn't the words so much as the tone. Calm. Genuine. Kind. "Thank you," she said, almost too softly. He didn't push for more. Just nodded once, then turned back to his drink. She didn't know who he was. Didn't expect to see him again. But for one moment, someone had seen her not as help, not as a punchline, but as a person. And in that small, flickering instant, something shifted. Later, as Isabel rode the late bus home, head resting against the cool glass, the city blurred past in neon smears. Her back ached. Her feet throbbed. But more than anything, her heart felt heavy. Not broken. Just tired. Tired of having to be graceful. Tired of having to carry everyone else's assumptions. She pulled her jacket tighter around her. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, Isabel promised herself something. Someday, she wouldn't just be the girl in the apron. She'd be the one with the mic. The one with the name they had to learn how to say. And next time, when someone tried to laugh at her, she'd smile. Because she'd already written the rest of the story. Isabel didn't sleep much that night. Even in the silence of her small apartment, with the hum of the fridge and the distant noise of traffic, her mind kept circling the ballroom. The bride's voice, the laughter, the way they looked through her, it all looped in her memory like a broken recording. She kept asking herself the same question: why did it still hurt so much? After all these years, why did one night, one insult, still feel like a punch in the chest? She knew the answer, but saying it out loud always felt like giving it power. Because no matter how many hours she worked, how many late-night classes she took, or how well she spoke, people still saw her as less. By morning, her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. It was short. "Hi Isabel. I was at the wedding. My name's Daniel. I'd like to apologize in person. May I take you to dinner?" She stared at it. A trap. A joke. She considered ignoring it. But something in her gut said otherwise. The man at the bar. That must have been him. Still, she didn't answer right away. Instead, she spent her morning working her shift at the bakery on 8th. The smell of fresh bread calmed her more than she expected. Yet as she took orders and smiled through small talk, she felt that same ache. Customers who assumed she didn't understand. People who handed her tips without looking her in the eye. It was always there. The reminder. When she finally replied, she kept it simple: "Okay. One dinner. I choose the place." 2 nights later, they met at a family-owned diner off Roosevelt Road. A place she trusted. A place where the waitresses knew her name and where her mother's picture hung on the wall from her days as the head cook. Daniel arrived early. He stood when she walked in. No suit this time. Just a clean button-up and jeans. He looked nervous. That helped. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. "Let's be clear," she said, sliding into the booth. "This isn't a date." "Understood." She studied him. The wedding version of him had been polished, quiet. But here, he looked real. Uncertain. Not the kind of man who threw around charm. "Why did you message me?" He hesitated. "Because I saw something I didn't like. And I didn't stop it." Isabel tilted her head. "You mean the bride?" "Yeah. Her. The way she spoke to you. I didn't say anything, and I should have." She folded her arms. People like her don't even realize how they sound. And people like you usually don't say anything because it doesn't affect you. You're right, he said. That surprised her. I come from a world where we get taught early on that silence keeps everything neat. I didn't want to cause a scene. But then I saw you. The way you stood there. Like you were holding up more than just a tray. She didn't respond. The waitress brought their food. Isabel's go-to, enchiladas, rice, beans. Comfort on a plate. He looked at her meal. You come here a lot. This was my mom's kitchen before it was a restaurant. She cooked here for 10 years. She still does. Isabel's face changed. She passed. Cancer. 4 years ago. Daniel looked down. I'm sorry. She worked 2 jobs until her hands swelled too much to hold a pan. And even then, she still showed up. People loved her here. Me? They barely see. She surprised herself saying that. But it was true. It bothers me, she added, that people like the bride just move through the world assuming they matter more. Like their voice weighs more. Like their complaints get answered faster. Daniel nodded slowly. That night made me think about things I haven't wanted to admit. Like what? He hesitated. Like how much easier life has been for me. Doors opened. People listened. And I started thinking, what if that room had listened to you the same way they listened to her? That made her pause. What do you do? She asked. Philanthropy. Mostly for education and small business development. She raised an eyebrow. So you give money? Sometimes. But I try to listen, too. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Isabel said, more to herself than him, I want to build something. Not for pity. But for kids like me. What would you build? A space for young girls to learn trade skills. Sewing, cooking, coding, even design. Somewhere they can see they matter. He looked at her seriously. Why haven't you started? She shrugged. Money. Time. Doubt. Take your pick. Daniel tapped the edge of his glass. You shouldn't have to fight so hard just to be seen. Isabel laughed, but it wasn't funny. But I do. Every job interview, every classroom, every sidewalk. I see it in their faces. They already decided what I am. And what are you? Tired, she said. But not done. Later, as they walked outside, the sky above Chicago glowed orange against the city lights. He opened the door for her without speaking. She paused beside her car. You really meant to just say sorry? Nothing else? Yes. But also no, Daniel said. I wanted to understand. And maybe help. She looked at him for a long moment. Then remember this, not every story has a happy ending. Some of us are just trying to be allowed to write our own. She got in her car. Drove away. But even as she turned the corner, something in her chest felt lighter. Not fixed. Not healed. Just, a little less alone. She didn't know what would come next. But for once, she didn't dread the question. Because maybe, just maybe, her story was about to begin in a different way. It started small. A glance too long. A shift in tone. The next time Isabel clocked in at the restaurant, the kitchen staff looked at her differently. The hostess avoided eye contact. The manager barely acknowledged her. A week had passed since her dinner with Daniel, and somehow, word had gotten out. She didn't post about it. She didn't tell anyone. But the silence in the staff room was loud. And judgment, she knew, didn't always need words. She thinks she's better now, someone muttered behind her. She kept wiping the counter. Pretended not to hear. But her stomach twisted. Later that night, she saw her next week's schedule. 3 fewer shifts. No explanation. Just a change in staffing, the manager said, avoiding her eyes. She wanted to ask if it had anything to do with the bride's family being longtime customers. But she already knew. This wasn't new. In her second year of college, Isabel had lost her work-study job after complaining about a professor who made a comment about her limited background. No follow-up. No support. Just a quiet cut from the budget. Once, when she tried to apply for a city grant for young entrepreneurs, she was told her application was too emotional. The form wanted numbers, not stories. Never mind that she had experience, drive, and a full business plan. She didn't speak the right language, not Spanish, but business jargon. Polite, polished, inaccessible. At the DMV, when she helped her aunt renew her ID, the clerk refused to speak slowly, rolling his eyes every time her aunt asked for clarification. Isabel stepped in to translate. He barely concealed his annoyance. If she can't understand basic English, why is she even here, he'd muttered. At the local clinic, her friend Rosa had waited 7 hours with her sick child, only to be told the pediatrician had left early. No apology. No urgency. Just a shrug and a pamphlet. And every time Isabel had raised her voice, even gently, even reasonably, she felt the shift. The label. Aggressive. Too sensitive. Hard to work with. Now, in her own workplace, those labels were quietly forming again. She could feel it. The turning point came when she opened her phone one morning and saw her name tagged in a post. A local gossip account had posted a blurry photo of her and Daniel outside the diner. The caption read, "From waitress to wifey. Some people know how to climb." The comments hurt more than the post. Must be nice to skip the struggle. Typical. They always find a way in. She probably planned it. Isabel sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling. She hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't asked for attention. But now, she was the center of a story she didn't write. The resentment burned deep. Because this is what happens when someone from her world steps into theirs. The rules change. The walls close in. And instead of being applauded, she was picked apart. Then came the twist. That afternoon, she received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a letter, handwritten in a neat but unfamiliar style. Dear Isabel, you don't know me, but I was at the wedding. I saw what happened. I was too scared to say anything, and I regret it every day. You reminded me of my mother, who worked as a cleaner and died before anyone ever knew her name. Thank you for standing there with your head high. I'm ashamed of how quiet I was. I'm trying to do better. I hope this helps, even a little. Folded inside was a $200 prepaid card. Isabel sat frozen, staring at the letter. Her throat closed. All this time, she'd felt alone in the shame, in the judgment. But someone had seen her. Someone remembered. She cried. Not out of pain, but because the moment cracked something open. The truth? She didn't need everyone to understand her. She just needed one person to see her. She thought about deleting her social media. Thought about texting Daniel to say, forget it, this isn't worth it. But then she remembered the way her mother used to come home after cleaning office buildings, her hands raw, her body tired, but her voice proud. We are not what they say, she would whisper. We are more. So Isabel didn't quit. Instead, she printed out the article she'd written for her scholarship application, an essay about immigrant women in the workforce, and she pinned it to the breakroom corkboard. No one said anything. But someone tore it down that night. She found it in the trash. Still, she kept going. She showed up for every reduced shift. She looked each customer in the eye. She smiled when it was hardest. A week later, Daniel invited her to a networking event for a nonprofit that funded education initiatives. She hesitated. She knew what kind of crowd would be there. It's not fancy, he promised. Just people who care. She wore a dress from a thrift store. Clean, simple, elegant. But when she walked in, the stares returned. Are you catering? Oh, you must be the assistant. Even after Daniel introduced her properly, some people nodded politely and turned back to their champagne. One woman leaned in and said, "It's so inspiring when people like you work hard." People like you. Isabel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She left early. Back on the train, she stared at her reflection in the window. Not just tired now, but worn. Why was it that every step forward came with someone trying to shove her back? Why did her ambition threaten people? Why did kindness feel like pity, and silence feel like punishment? When she got home, she opened her laptop and began to write. A blog post. Raw. Honest. Titled, "The Rules No One Writes Down." She listed the things she'd learned. If you speak up, you're a problem. If you stay quiet, you're ignored. If you succeed, you must have cheated. If you struggle, it's your fault. If you're proud, you're arrogant. If you're hurt, you're dramatic. She wrote for hours. Not to get likes. Not for attention. But to breathe. And when she was done, she didn't hit publish. She saved it. Because some stories, she realized, weren't for the world yet. Some were just for surviving. But she knew one thing, she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, her voice would help someone else stand when the world tried to make them sit down. And that was enough to keep going. Some truths come quietly. It was a Wednesday morning when Isabel got the call. Not from Daniel. Not from work. But from a number she didn't recognize. "Hi, is this Isabel Cruz?" the voice asked. Gentle. Warm. Female. "Yes. I'm calling from the Chicago Arts History Archive. We recently received a donation of old garments and photographs. Your name came up." Isabel blinked. "Me?" "There's a collection from the Rivera Sewing Collective, a local garment group active in the early 2000s. Your mother, Esperanza Cruz, was a founding member." Isabel sat down slowly, her breath caught. Her mother had never spoken much about that group. Just called it, the side hustle. "Would you be willing to visit the archive? We think there's something here you'd want to see." She agreed. 2 days later, she stood in front of a display table covered with hand-stitched garments. The labels were faded, but clear. One read, "Designed by Esperanza Cruz." A tear welled up. Your mother contributed to several undocumented exhibitions, the archivist explained. Most of these women weren't credited publicly due to their status, but their work was everywhere. Fashion, film, museum installations. No one ever told me. The woman smiled gently. Because they weren't allowed to say. On the table was a worn photo, her mother, smiling, arms around 2 other women, one of whom looked strangely familiar. Isabel stared. Who is this? The archivist pulled out a file. That's Cecilia Whitmore. She was a donor and advisor. Married into the Whitmore family. She credited your mother with saving her first fashion line. Isabel froze. Whitmore? She took a picture with her phone and sent it to Daniel. Do you know this woman? He replied in minutes. That's my aunt. She passed away 10 years ago. Why? Isabel typed slowly. She worked with my mom. Your family knew her. But no one remembered. A long pause. Then, we need to talk. That night, Daniel arrived at her door, out of breath. Not from running. From something else. My father was on the board that cut funding for the Rivera Collective, he said. They said it was unsustainable and unverified. But really, it was because most of the workers were undocumented. My aunt fought it. She lost. Isabel felt a wave crash through her. So my mom's work, her effort, her legacy, all erased. Not erased, Daniel said. Buried. She wanted to scream. But all she could do was whisper, and now she's a line in a file. No. Now she's more than that. If you want it, I can help fund a public exhibit. With her name. Her story. Isabel hesitated. The offer felt like salt on a bruise. But also, a door. We don't need charity. Not charity. Visibility. That word. That night, she opened the saved blog post again. She read every word. And this time, she hit publish. Within hours, the comments poured in. Messages from women across the city. Thank you for saying what we feel. I was part of Rivera too. I thought we were forgotten. Your mother helped me when I was pregnant. I never forgot her. The post went viral. Not worldwide. But where it mattered. Isabel walked to the archive 2 days later. A small crowd had gathered. One woman clutched a tote bag embroidered with Esperanza's initials. Your mother gave me my first job, she said. She saved me. And in that moment, Isabel felt it. Not pity. Not judgment. Recognition. She was no longer just a waitress with a voice no one wanted to hear. She was her mother's daughter. A builder. A fighter. News outlets started calling. Local reporters. Community journalists. Everyone wanted to know about Esperanza Cruz, the seamstress who changed lives in secret. Daniel stood beside her during the first interview. But he stayed quiet. This was her story. When asked what she wanted the world to remember, Isabel replied. That the people you ignore might be the ones holding your world together. That visibility isn't a luxury. It's a right. But even in this moment of truth, not everyone cheered. Some accused her of chasing fame. Others said she was exploiting grief. Online comments resurfaced, this time sharper. So now she's an activist. Typical. They always make it about themselves. Isabel read them all. And then closed the browser. Because she knew better now. She was never trying to be a symbol. She just refused to be silent. But this wasn't the end of her story. Not even close. Because someone else was watching. Someone she didn't expect. A woman from the city council had attended the exhibit. Quietly. Without introducing herself. 2 weeks later, Isabel received an email. Ms. Cruz, we would like to speak with you about a community leadership program. Your story moved many of us. We believe your voice can shape more than memories. It can shape policy. Would you consider meeting? She stared at the screen. Then smiled slowly. Maybe her mother hadn't just sewn fabric. Maybe she'd sewn a future. And if Isabel accepted this offer, it wouldn't be for recognition. It would be to make sure no one like her mother, or like her, was ever forgotten again. The next chapter wasn't written yet. But it was waiting. And what happened next would change more than just her life. It might change the city. When Isabel walked into City Hall, her sneakers were still scuffed from the bus ride. The security guard gave her a once-over but didn't stop her. The woman from the city council met her in the lobby with a handshake firm enough to feel honest. Thank you for coming, Isabel. I almost didn't, she replied. Wasn't sure my voice belonged here. The woman smiled. That's exactly why we need you. Isabel had spent her life in rooms where she felt too loud, too foreign, too ambitious. Now, she was being invited to speak in one where her story mattered. At the leadership roundtable, Isabel sat between a local activist and a small business owner. They all had stories, but none like hers. She spoke about Rivera. About her mother. About every job that dismissed her before she could finish her sentence. She didn't use big words. She spoke like she always had. You say, inclusion, but we know what that usually means: smile, nod, stay in your lane. That's not justice. That's decoration. The room went quiet. And someone finally said it: she's right. That one moment shifted everything. Within weeks, she was asked to help consult on immigrant workforce programs. She was invited to panels. She helped draft language for a new local hiring ordinance. She didn't have a degree in policy. But she had lived it. Still, there were moments that hurt. The stares when she walked into events alone. The whispered, "Isn't she just a waitress?" Even when she stood behind a podium, there were people in the back who looked bored. But for every skeptic, there was someone who listened. Who emailed. Who said, "That thing you said. It made me see differently." She held on to those. And then came the day she returned to her old restaurant. It wasn't for food. It wasn't for revenge. A young girl she used to train had reached out. Said she was struggling. "They don't take me seriously. I feel invisible." Isabel took her hand. "I know how that feels. But you don't have to stay invisible. You just need to remember who you are when no one else does." They cried together. Quietly. Over coffee and noise. That night, Isabel walked home with the letter from the city council in her pocket. An official invitation. To speak at the Immigrant Heritage Month celebration. Keynote. She stood on the stage in a borrowed blazer. Looked out at the crowd. Saw children with tired eyes and parents who looked like hers had. She began simply. "My name is Isabel Cruz. I used to believe my name was too hard for people to say. But now, I believe it's the one they'll remember." And they did. Not because she shouted. Not because she rose above. But because she stayed. Because she chose to keep standing when sitting would have been easier. Because she told the truth. And at the end of her speech, when the applause quieted and the stage lights faded, a small girl approached her. Clutching a notepad, shy eyes raised. "Can I draw you? For my project at school?" Isabel knelt down, eyes wet. "Of course you can. Just promise me something." "What?" "That you'll draw yourself next." The girl nodded. And in that moment, Isabel knew the shift wasn't just hers. It had already begun in someone else. The kind of shift that doesn't end with applause. But with action. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere, someone is still waiting to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, your voice is the one they're waiting for.